coalition is comprised of 24 public and private partners. They include state and local officials, state legislators, labor unions, and businesses, and economic development interests. One thing I just will say at the outset, without sort of getting too much in the legality of it, is when a state AG brings a lawsuit, and I have a little bit of experience on this, when a state AG brings a lawsuit, as an attorney general, you are limited to articulating harm specifically to state government. Okay, that's the role of the attorney general, the harm to state government. In amicus brief, what we call this friend of the court brief, as governor, when I file that brief with all the partners, I can articulate a broader set of harms. In other words, it's not limited just to the harm to state government specifically, but rather, as you will hear, from workers, from consumers, from private businesses. That is something that we can do in an amicus brief that state AGs cannot. So I've been in touch with the AGs in the lawsuit. They obviously welcome this brief because it does tell a broader story, and that helps with the lawsuit that is pending right now. We appreciate being joined by the following individuals who you'll be hearing from. John Holden, President of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, District 751. Suzanne Dale Esty, Executive Director of the Washington Economic Development Association. And you'll also hear from one of the two lawyers who've been working on this case, Steve Fogg and Catherine Joy. They're from Core Cronin. Again, I just want to emphasize, they volunteered to do this work for free, so there's no cost to the taxpayers for bringing this brief, and we deeply appreciate their work. I'm also joined by Kristen Beneski, who's my legal counsel, as well as many other folks who've been involved in putting this brief together and bringing together this coalition. So let me briefly explain how we got here, why we're supporting this multi-state lawsuit. We'll talk about Washington's unique harms and disproportionate impacts, and then you'll hear from our speakers. And of course, we're happy to take your questions. The speakers are also all available to answer your questions one-on-one afterwards if you have one-on-one questions as well. So President Trump has issued, as you know, multiple executive orders announcing higher tariffs on virtually every nation in the world. Tariffs on most products from China, for example, are 30%. 25% tariff on many products from Canada and Mexico. 10% tariffs on most products from the rest of the world. These reckless, erratic, and illegal tariffs have thrown the global economy into chaos. American working people and consumers, including Washingtonians, are paying the price. The Constitution is clear. Congress, not the President, ultimately has the power to impose tariffs on global trade. In response, last month, a coalition of state attorneys general filed a lawsuit to block these illegal tariffs. Our brief supports their legal challenge. And as I mentioned, it allows us to share impacts to the state of Washington. We have private interest and local governments represented in our brief. And in short, this provides a more comprehensive picture of the harm caused by these illegal tariffs. In moving forward with this brief, been mindful of the fact that many law firms have been reluctant to stand up to the administration. So I just want to say another special thank you to Core Cronin and the attorneys here who are willing to do that at a time when it's been well documented there's been a reluctance of some firms to do that. And so just as a lawyer, speaking as a lawyer as well, I just deeply appreciate their willingness to do this. We also appreciate the Attorney General's office appointing them as Special Assistant Attorneys General to work pro bono so we could file this lawsuit. So just to be clear, in order to make this work, Nick Brown, our Attorney General, he's the one who we appreciate, made this appointment so they could work with us on this brief. If these tariffs continue, this is going to cost members from the unions you're going to hear from their jobs potentially. Our coalition also includes business owners. We'll give you an example. North Cascades Builders Supply has operated for 27 years in rural Okanagan County. Greg Goad from that business is here. Greg, where are you at? Over my left shoulder. Thanks for being here, Greg. Greg is here. This business has imported windows from one Canadian manufacturer for more than 25 years. It's the cornerstone of their business. The uncertainty caused by those tariffs has caused them to lose large projects totaling $250,000 in sales. That is just one example of one business here in Washington State being impacted by these tariffs. But Greg and his business, they are not alone. Other coalition partners have shared stories about rebidding projects due to increased costs, disruption to the aerospace supply chain, and increased construction costs at a time when housing is increasingly expensive. It's difficult to predict the full extent of the harm these tariffs will cause Washington State, but it's clear they will be significant. Our state is the 9th largest exporter of goods in the United States. Washington State has shipped $58 billion worth of goods to the world last year. Nearly $120 billion in exports and imports flowed through Washington state ports last year. As of 2022, the export of Washington goods supported approximately 160,000 jobs statewide. That's 18% above the national average. The countries with the highest Trump tariffs, China, Canada, and Mexico, account for nearly half of Washington's imports. These tariffs alone are projected to add $4 billion in costs to Washington state imports from those countries. Altogether, the illegal tariffs could cost Washington companies an estimated $18 to $21 billion. That's a statistic from the Washington Council on International Trade. I also want to add that these tariffs and the retaliatory tariffs from our biggest trade partners have ripple effects that hit small businesses particularly hard. Of the more than 12,000 companies that export goods from Washington state, 90% are small and medium-sized businesses. Smaller manufacturers operate on tighter margins with less flexibility to absorb these increased costs. That means retaliatory tariffs from other countries are particularly harmful to those manufacturers. And let's just be clear, these tariffs amount to a tax on Washington families. They will raise prices on everything from homes and electricity to coffee and children's toys. I also want to stress the uncertainty these erratic trade policies are causing for Washington businesses. Businesses rely on stability and certainty in doing business. You talk to anybody who runs a business, and I've talked to plenty, that is the one thing I hear over and over and over again. Whether it's certainty from the state government in the way we regulate, or certainty from the global market. Certainty is what they depend on to operate their businesses. They need to be able to plan ahead, and these tariffs have really thrown all that into a state of chaos. I'm proud that in the face of that federal chaos, leaders here in Washington continue to work together to stand up for all Washingtonians. It's going to take all of us working together, and that's why I'm so pleased with this coalition coming together on a very tight timeline to file this brief and make sure that all of these voices are heard as this important case moves forward. So with that, I'm going to turn to our first speaker, and that again is John Holden. John?
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, everyone. I am John Holden, president of IAM District 751. We represent thousands of workers in the aerospace manufacturing industry in the state of Washington. On tariffs, the IAM generally supports the use of tariffs to protect key industries, our workforce, and the communities that we live in. When trading partners undermine our key industries or key sectors of the economy, in our case, aerospace manufacturing, we must react. We must address illegal or unfair trade policy that undermines our ability to compete, and that's what Congress must do to step in and address that. It is Congress's job to take action in a strategic way, along with other critical actions to support the goal of onshoring manufacturing capacity and capability. Tariffs aren't enough. Tariffs must be accompanied by real investment in infrastructure, incentives, and workforce development policy that work to build capacity, infrastructure, and the workforce at the same time. This is why Congress must be engaged in any discussion on tariffs. For tariffs to be meaningful, there must also be legislation that encourages industry to build infrastructure and capacity. Legislation that requires state-registered apprenticeship programs and apprenticeship utilization that builds the workforce in a way that industry and workers together succeed in meeting the needs of the future. The chaotic use of tariffs has done none of that. There is no plan on how to increase manufacturing capacity and capability in aerospace manufacturing or in the supply chain. The supply chain in the U.S. and Canada move work back and forth in an integrated fashion. The workforce in the U.S. and Canada benefit from their ability to unionize and bargain for better wages and benefits. These tariffs, however, used in this way, have a great potential to hurt the aerospace industry and the workers who have contributed to one of the most important sectors of our economy. This is simply an imposed tax on families and the working class. Tariffs used in this fashion don't protect key industries or markets. It doesn't build more manufacturing capacity or the capability of the workforce. It simply raises the cost of living for Americans. This takes well thought out action by Congress that leverages many interlocking principles: apprenticeship, permitting, incentives, funds for infrastructure that, when applied appropriately, we all succeed. Congress must evaluate and must engage in this to be successful. Thank you.
Good afternoon. When our organization, the Washington Economic Development Association, and I serve as the executive director, and WEDA represents 200 economic development organizations across the state. When we were asked to join and state our position against the federal tariffs implemented and proposed in recent months, we didn't hesitate. We had been hearing alarming concerns about the federal tariff proposals from economic developers who had been hearing from their local businesses, large and small. They were initially concerned about all of the uncertainty and turmoil that had been created and the impact on their operations, supply chains, and growth strategies. So the Washington Commerce Department, under the leadership of Director Wen and Assistant Director of the Office of Economic Development and Competitiveness, Grace Yu, is with us today. And other economic development organizations, they hustled and rapidly created resources, workshops, and toolkits to help businesses understand and navigate through the dramatic changes in global trade policy. More recently, we are now facing very real and very deep economic impacts, serious interruptions to supply chains, job layoffs, and potential revenue losses in the billions of dollars, and the overall drastic threats to Washington State's economic development, economic competitiveness caused by federal tariffs. Our organization and our position on this issue is not partisan. It is about jobs, jobs which support families and jobs which support communities. Our work is all about economic vitality and economic opportunity. Our position is also about the protection of family farms and generationally owned, family-run small businesses. As you have heard, Washington is one of the most trade-tied states in the nation, with 40% of our jobs tied to international trade. So Washington State is truly on the front lines in these trade wars, and the stakes are obviously very high. As John said, tariffs can be a smart tool, but they have to be employed strategically and methodically. We actually want our companies thinking globally and exploring new markets, but trade relationships are established and they flourish when there is trust and stability, and they are threatened when there is chaos and risk. The appalling instability our employers, workers, families, and communities have faced in recent months has been far-reaching. It has impacted farmers in Eastern Washington, maritime businesses here in Puget Sound and statewide, our ports, and Washington's really incredible industries, from aerospace to technology, retail, timber, life sciences, and again, companies large and small. One of Washington's greatest economic strengths is the diversity of our economy and the globally facing companies that are headquartered here and that do business here. This diversity is at serious risk because of these policies and proposals and the sweeping, inconsistent, ever-changing, and haphazard manner in which they have been put forward. Repealed, partially repealed, it really has been quite a confusing roller coaster ride for so many of us. This confusion and uncertainty has created a broader economic impact to the service sector, our restaurants, the tourism and hospitality industries, and small businesses. And as concerns, anxieties, and cost increases have reached really families' kitchen tables, the ripple impact is now hitting philanthropic giving to our nonprofit organizations, and even as a mom, I'll say families, well-being, and workers' mental health. So we are asking for the courts and policymakers to recognize the turmoil that has been created and pause and reconsider the severity and impact of these harmful policies. I also wanted to quickly mention that economic developers are ready and available to support our businesses as they continue to navigate through this. We are here to serve you. We can share information and ideas about possible supply chain adjustments, alternative sourcing, resources such as the State Shared Work Program to manage labor costs. There's a great program called the Foreign Trade Zones, which helps defer tariffs until products enter the U.S., legal expertise, and so much more. Washington's economic strength has always come from our ability to connect with the world. By working together, businesses, labor, communities, and partners at every level, we can support economic resilience, protect jobs, and keep opportunities growing across our state. Governor, I want to thank you for your leadership and commitment to Washington's diverse economy, to economic vitality and opportunity, and for your advocacy for our entire state. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Fogg. I am a partner at the Seattle law firm Core Cronin, and Ms. Joy and I were very happy to contribute our efforts for free, we call that pro bono, to this very important effort. Look, these tariffs are crippling our state. There's massive economic cost. It wasn't hard to put together a coalition here because everybody feels it across the state. On top of that, there's no question that these tariffs are unlawful and quite literally lawless. It's Congress. This is black letter law, you know, day one of law school. It's Congress, not the president, who has the authority to impose tariffs. And it was important for the Court of International Trade, which is already hearing from attorney generals and other folks across the country, for them to hear about the impact this has had on our state. And it was important to my law firm and to me as a lawyer to contribute to this effort. I think that it's quite clear that we are living in the grips of a lawless administration. And as Judge Kuhnauer, federal judge here in Seattle, said recently when he was faced with an equally unlawful executive order just a month or two ago about birthright citizenship, he said the question people are going to ask is, where were the judges and where were the lawyers? And I've told Governor Ferguson, who certainly when he was the AG, we have done battle before, right? I respect Governor Ferguson. He was a very aggressive attorney general, but when it comes to this, I told him that our law firm stands for the rule of law. And in these times, which I, you know, as a guy who's been practicing law for 35 years, I view it as an emergency. There are lawyers across the state, across the city, not just my firm, that are happy to do whatever we can to stand up for the rule of law. So, you know, what I view as our very small effort here is that we've contributed our time and our expertise, Ms. Joy and I, at no cost to the taxpayer, to get this brief and to get the views of these folks in front of the Court of International Trade. And we're going to do whatever we can, follow this case, anything else we can do to stand up for the rule of law. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks to all the speakers, and we're happy to take your questions. And so, who wants to fire away first?
Governor, are you
Yes.
worried about the combined impacts of the tariffs and the taxes you signed yesterday?
I'm worried about everything when it comes to state government and our ability to provide core service to the people of the state of Washington, potential looming cuts from the federal government, set aside the tariffs. So I think in the press conference yesterday when we signed off on the budget, you know, we have our own internal challenges with our budget, but we have some significant challenges coming ahead. The looming federal cuts that could literally cost us billions of dollars, and I think I also mentioned yesterday tariffs as another example. And I mean, you heard from everybody, right? The impacts could be profound for our state. They are profound for our state now, and could continue to be even more pronounced. So, yes, you know, as a governor, I'm deeply concerned about what's happening, which is why we're taking the step of making sure that the voices of Washingtonians are heard before this court as it makes an important decision about the future of these tariffs. Yes?
You mentioned the unlawfulness. This has been a White House that hasn't necessarily listened to that report, that is in front of it.
Yeah.
Also thinking about Congress's role in this. They have a bill that hasn't really moved that would reassert their authority. Does that hurt their chances if this lawsuit bluntly won't change anything?
So I'll repeat the question so everybody here could hear it as well. So I think the question went to, hey, the president has in the past not always followed court orders. Hey, will this lawsuit change anything, even if successful? And sort of the role of Congress, I think, was in there as well. Look, don't get me started on Congress abdicating its authority. I'm a governor, not a member of Congress, thank God. But look, history will judge Congress. Okay, history will judge Congress. I've got to focus on what I can control or have an impact on. And so when it comes to this case, yes, that if the court goes the way we all hope, that and shuts down these legal tariffs, yes, I'm optimistic that the administration will follow that order. But there's no guarantee. I mean, I find it hard to believe I'm standing in front of a group of people saying I can't 100% guarantee a president is going to follow a judicial order. But I feel reasonably confident that they would in this particular case for these tariffs. And but to that point, I will also add that I just appreciate everybody who stepped up to join this. You know, we do live in a time where a lot of folks don't want to poke up their head and take on the administration. I hear from folks all the time who say, hey, Bob, I think what you're doing is great on something, but I just can't join that. We just can't be out there. That's why I appreciate everybody who's here physically, who signed on, law firms, because that's what it takes to push back. So we feel confident about the case, glad the voice is being heard, and trust the president will follow the rule of law.
Governor, I wanted to ask about your engagement with the administration. If anyone on your team or anyone has spoken with anyone on the president's team on maybe kind of a constructive, persuasive argument in addition to this legal argument, because we've seen other Democratic governors, Governor Hochul in New York, Governor Whitmer, also engaging with the administration on different issues, and if that's part of your strategy as well, and if not, what that means for Washington State, because we know this is also a very retaliatory situation.
Yeah. Look, I'm always open to a conversation with anybody, but I think the president's views on this are crystal clear, okay? And so what I believe is being productive with my time and the time of others as well. I believe that. And I think the most productive way to put a stop to these illegal tariffs is by taking this action, for sure. Also, time is of the essence, right? That there's a court case, there are hearings, this case is moving, it's moving quickly, and that's why it needs to happen. As opposed to the retaliatory side, you know, it's, I'm mindful, you know, I'm mindful of that, but I just believe that as a governor, and back when I was Attorney General, I can't let the concern that the administration may retaliate against my state because I'm standing up for my state, I can't have that determine my decision making. I just can't. So that doesn't mean I'm not mindful of it or aware or try to make sure I'm having conversations about what that might look like. In contrast, what I would say, you know, this is really a time right now where folks need to speak out, okay, and not be scared of standing up for honestly what's right. And Congress isn't doing that, that's on them. I have a role, I plan on using that role. Everybody here has a role, they're using their role, they're using their ability to effectuate change. And so, mindful of it, of course, you know, I'm not dumb, you know, I understand what's going on, but for me, everybody's got to make their own choices, but I don't want to look back, you know, when I'm done with public service and feel like I pulled my punches. I just don't want to do that.
And if I can follow up on the tariff bill into that, there are some in his administration who put the tariffs a little bit softer.
Yeah.
So there could be room for engagement, maybe not with the president himself, with other members of his team.
Yeah.
Is that something that you'd be part of?
We're open to conversation. We've had conversation with congressional delegation members. We're open to that. But I want to be clear on this. This has been moving quite quickly, right? And so we're not ruling out future conversations by any stretch, but the court's making decisions soon. We want to make sure we had our voice there. Yes, go for it, yeah.
I just wanted to talk more about the harm specifically to the ports. Have you seen any data that shows volumes down?
Yep.
That we're less competitive here in Washington?
So the end question went to ports. We have folks here from the ports. I welcome anyone who wants to step on up on this. I think I've seen Ryan coming up, by all means coming up. So I have thoughts, but I think I'll let the experts, and Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself just for folks? Yeah, go for it.
Thanks for the question. My name is Ryan Calkins. I'm a commissioner here at the Port of Seattle and also for the Northwest Seaport Alliance. What we've seen so far is a slight reduction over the last couple of weeks associated with the earlier round of very high tariffs. We're now seeing a rebound in forecasting for the next few weeks as businesses who are attempting to backfill what was drawn down in inventories over the last few weeks during that very high period of tariffs against China in particular, that they're starting to rush orders to the U.S. in anticipation of the end of that 90-day pause with China. So we're seeing a roller coaster, which for us is not the optimal way to operate a port facility. We really want a steady stream rather than peaks and valleys. I want to give a shout out to the workers here, the longshore workers who are represented, the rail workers, the truck drivers, who are the ones that operate these ports. That's very hard for them too. You know, we'd love to be able to have a steady stream of traffic. And in longer term, what's been hard for us hearing from the businesses who use the ports both to export and import, particularly our agricultural producers in Eastern Washington, the challenge right now is knowing what the tariff rate will be when their products are ready to go to market. You're planting seeds now in the spring for harvest in the fall, and if you don't know exactly whether you'll be able to sell your soybeans to China or your corn to Southeast Asia, what does that mean for how you plant now? And unfortunately, I think it means that a lot of businesses are choosing to be conservative. And the knock-on impacts of that mean a drag on our economy generally. So my concern is that this uncertainty around tariffs is creating a real drag on the economy.
And just to echo that, that is, I think I alluded to it earlier, right? And thanks for those comments, Ryan, is that consistency, whether you're a worker, whether you're a business, it's imperative, right? It is imperative to have that so you can make those choices that you're looking out to the future. And a day doesn't go by where I don't hear that concern from somebody, a worker, a business, right? Someone in Washington State. And those impacts are, can just be, to your point, folks got to look inward a little bit and be a little more cautious, and that has ripple effects throughout our economy. Somebody over here had a question as well, so yeah.
Yeah, Governor Newsom instructed his administration to kind of look at strategic partnerships, ways to kind of
Yep.
Get around. I don't know, are you looking into anything?
Sure, yeah. Well, I just had a conversation with the ambassador to the United States from the United Kingdom, for example. That's the meeting I had just before stepping out here. So I can assure you for all these conversations, whether with ambassadors from other countries, of which I've had a number already, tariffs is always a conversation point. And we often have our own relationships with those countries, right? And each of those conversations is seeking to sort of redouble those efforts, look for more opportunities. So that is true with conversations I've had with individuals representing the United Kingdom, Canada, Mexico, Finland. You get the idea. Every single one of those conversations, that has been a common theme throughout is, hey, how can we work together despite what's going on at the federal government, which is discouraging as a governor, right? That we're fighting the headwinds of the federal government right now in these relationships that have been strong trade partners for many, many decades. But that is a reality, yes. Yes.
Wondering if Ryan was able to address the impact on workers
Absolutely. So we have workers here. If anybody wants, I think the question went to either port commissioners or to workers or longshore folks. They want to talk about the impacts. Mark, thank you. If you don't mind just introducing yourself, it would be great. Thank you.
I'm Mark Elverson with Local 19 Seattle, ILWU International. We're down about 10 or 20% for container volume right here in Seattle. We're hoping that the tariffs end here in a couple days and we can go back to normalcy. Like they said, we need consistent work in the Port of Seattle, Port of Tacoma. That's what we need. As for the farmers and stuff, that's what we're worried about, our wheat dock out there, what they're going to plant, soybeans, corn, wheat. That's the same problems that we need. We just need a straight, truthful answer from the presidency. Thank you.
Anybody else want to add on that? Yes.
Potential job losses, what are the factors? Has there been any actual job loss from tariffs so far, or anything that you've seen?
Do you mind? Sorry, the plane caught me at the very end. Can you repeat the second half?
Evidence that there have been people who lost their jobs from tariffs.
Has there been evidence of people who've lost their jobs? Well, you just heard from, hey, that things are down across the board, right? I think you're from all the speakers of that. So that's a reality we're facing. Businesses have to tighten up. They don't have the certainty. They're having to make difficult decisions on investments and employment. So, and that's only going to continue if these go forward. So the impacts are significant for us. Welcome anyone if they want to add to that. But I think that's pretty clear that we're experiencing that. Yes.
I have one other tax question because of businesses. You mentioned yesterday that there are some taxes that you passed into law that you're kind of paying attention to.
Yeah.
Are there specific ones related to businesses that if they're really hurting, and what action would you take going forward?
Yeah, what I would say is that there are a number of revenues that were adopted by the legislature sort of late in the process. I don't mean this is a criticism, I want to be clear, right? But they were adopted relatively late in the process, and there maybe was not as much public conversation as we would like. And so, from my standpoint, what I tried to make clear was, as I move forward to adopt proposing my budget for the first time, right, later on this year for the supplemental, is we'll be revisiting each of those revenue sources to make sure that there are not any unintended consequences in the adoption of any of those revenue sources. And as we move forward, do we still need all of those going forward as well? Some of that's going to be impacted by the conversation we're having now, right? The impact of tariffs, the impact of federal cuts on programs we have in Washington State. But when it comes to my proposed budget for the supplemental, yes, we'll be looking at everything that's been adopted, taking a fresh look, having conversations with businesses across our state. Those conversations are already ongoing. I'm hearing from folks, I'm talking to folks. Those will be ongoing to make sure that we get it as right as possible. Any last questions? Any final thoughts from any of our speakers, by the way? John, anything you want to add before we wrap up? Okay, good. Suzanne? So I just want to conclude. We're happy to stick around for questions you might have one-on-one. I just really want to say thanks to all the folks who really joined this coalition. As this case goes forward, we heard from some folks who want to join, but just the deadlines were very, very, very tight. We may literally amend this brief later on as this case goes forward because of just the big interest we heard from so many. But many organizations, you know, might have a process in order for they can sign on to a brief like this. But just really appreciate those who are stepping up. These briefs make a difference. You know, as someone who spent 12 years as Attorney General, these amicus briefs are important. Courts weigh them, and they make a difference. So I'm just deeply appreciative of everybody who's here today and others who couldn't make it today for their work. And we'll look forward to answering additional questions you may all have. Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Hey, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah. Good job. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Thanks so much. Yeah, keep help you guys. Thank you so much. I'm glad you're here. Yeah. Hey, how are you? I didn't realize you were standing right behind.